Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode number 141 of the Backlot 605 podcast. We are on week number 3 of our animation live-action hybrid movie series on films. Is that what we called it, Brian?
Sure,
I think so. I'm one of your co-hosts. I'm Casey Cutherman. That is Brian Mensing. Brian, how you doing on this Sunday afternoon?
I'm enjoying the nice warm weather outside, and then come inside and do this.
Yeah, you're living the dream.
Something like that.
Sure.
Sure.
Brian, I'm going to ask you one question before we start.
42.
Have you ever had an imaginary friend?
No.
No?
I did not.
You did not have your very own Pete's dragon then?
Well, no, because the dragon belonged to Pete. I couldn't take Pete's dragon because.
Well, you could have. You would have just been the villain of this movie.
Yeah, I'm not taking Pete's dragon.
You're not a villain?
No, I'm not a villain.
No, you are definitely.
I don't look like a roadshow pirate.
I wish I did, but we are not villains. I wish we both looked like him because he is awesome looking. You know what else is awesome, Brian? Our guest this week, Dylan Jacobson. Welcome to the show for the first time we've had Dylan on the show.
Thank you. Yeah, it's cool to be here. It's been forever since I've watched Pete's Dragon, since we're finally talking about it. So yeah. Mm-hmm. Let's do this.
Let's do it, Dylan. Before we get into this, though, let's start with what you do, where people can find some of your work. You are an artist. You have done actually right here. I have something that you did for us way back when. It was just literally stickers sitting on my desk.
Oh, yeah.
For our classic anime anatomy that is now. I don't know where it's at. I'll ask Kayla where it's at. But it was at one point the show that we did on here that you did the artwork for. But yeah, tell the people out there who you are, what you do, and also what's your favorite movie.
Oh, okay. Well, my title shifts a lot because I'm never satisfied with exactly what I'm aiming for. So right now I've been calling myself an illustrator. I often say I'm a comic writer or artist, but I do a lot more just illustration these days. A ton of figure art. I did a coloring book most recently. It was my big during COVID juggernaut size project. I released a free coloring book page every weekday for like 20 weeks, and then we put them all together and made a book. So that was pretty cool. I'm finally back to conventions, so life is starting to feel normal, but still trying to keep things safe and distanced and whatnot. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, I do tons and tons of artwork, and I stream every day. So one of the best places to catch me right now is Twitch every weekday at 8 a.m. till typically around 1 p.m. So you can bother me, put me in the background while you work, sort of thing. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
And then favorite movie. If you're stuck if you're stuck on an island and this is the one movie you can take with you, what's that movie?
So as I get older, I've come to appreciate that tastes shift. Right now, I think my favorite movie is Grand Budapest Hotel. It's phenomenally put together and brilliant. So I think that's where I'm at. In the past, I would have said something like, I don't know, by Kevin Smith, or Beetlejuice, because when I was a kid, that was possibly my most watched film. Mm-hmm. And then when I was in film school, I would have said Poltergeist, because I picked that for a special effects class and watched it like every day for weeks. So yeah, but right now, Grand Budapest, I think. So
all right, those are all awesome picks. Obviously, I assume then you're excited for the next Wes Anderson coming out, French Dispatch, here in coming out November, I think.
Yeah, at the end of the year. Yeah, so that'll be a pretty good time, I think. Maybe I'll see it in the theaters. For a while, my wife and I were going to the theater once a week because she was a grad student and we could get tickets for $5, and so we would do that. Mm-hmm. But with the state of the world, we were watching everything at home. So
right.
Yeah. I'm with you too, especially after going to the theater. Well, and we'll jump into the box office here on a couple movies that I saw. I'm like, the theater going experience is very different than what it was even a few years ago. Especially with my God, Black Widow. It took 30 minutes before the movie started. Just get to it. Right. And that's what people are saying about this podcast. Just get to it. So let's get to it then. Let's get to the box office results for this weekend then. Yeah. First up, we do have a new number one at the box office. You could call it the king of the box office because it does star King James, LeBron James, and Bugs Bunny. Space Jam: A New Legacy, $31.65 million at the box office. So new number one, Space Jam: A New Legacy. Oh boy.
Did either of you go see it?
At home.
I stayed home and watched it. And I regret I regret watching it for free.
Oof. I wanted to hear what people thought for it.
Me and Brian have very different thoughts, and that's all I'll leave mine at.
Yeah. We gotta leave that for the Patreon episode.
Right on.
No, yeah, this is one of those ones where it's like I plan on seeing it and whatnot, but being that we had the HBO dual release and whatnot, I'm like, I will watch this at home. Like, when it comes to the HBO ones, I've kind of picked and choose which ones I'd go see in the theater. Like, for instance, I already have my ticket bought for Suicide Squad to go to the theater for. And this one, I was like, yeah, I can watch this one at home. I can watch this one at home. I do kind of wonder what Disney's take is going, wow, we already got dethroned in our second week of at the our biggest return to the box office, and we already got dethroned after week one, which is probably something Disney's probably like, I don't like this.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I got dethroned by LeBron James.
I think
it is Space Jam.
Yeah,
so they could have seen it coming, I think.
And I think we're kind of at a point where Black Widow did really well last week, and a lot of people did watch it at home as well. Like Disney released the numbers for the premiere access for Black Widow, which is the first time they had ever done that. Therefore, it did really well for them for what they were expecting it to do. And that's what I think a lot of people, because, I mean, if you bought Black Widow last week, you're not going to go watch it a second time in the theater. You're just going to watch it at home.
Right.
For your second, third, fourth, fifth time, watching it. So you're just going to sit at home and watch it. So, and I think even people who probably watched it in the theater and really enjoyed it might have gone home and been like, yeah, I'll just buy it for $30 now. I'm going to buy it. I would have bought it for $20 in 3 months anyway. Why not just pay for $30 and I can watch it as many times as I want right now? So I think there's
to buy it again
until they buy it on Blu-ray again, and then they'll buy the entire Marvel Universe package in 10 years again. So they'll have 3 different versions of Black Widow in their collection. But I think there's just a lot of factors that go into this. Again, Space Jam was very, very hyped up for a couple of years now, as soon as this movie was announced with LeBron James. And I just think a lot of people were looking forward to getting back into the theater. This one's a straight up family picture, unlike Black Widow has been. So I think this one leans more into that family demographic than some of the other movies in the box office that are out there right now.
And there's a lot of adults who are, watching as kids who are taking their kids, sort of thing. So.
Right. I could definitely see that. Just everybody going, hey, this is a movie I loved as a kid. I'm gonna let you watch this as a kid now.
And I also think sports fans are kind of underrated when they go out to the movies, because they don't go out like sports fans more often than not. They're very pick and choose of what they see in the theater. And if you have a sports star in the lead and it's about sports, that's going to lean more into that. Space Jam definitely leans into the NBA fans that are out there. Which is something we don't get a lot in terms of we don't get a whole lot of sports movies.
And we do, it feels like, in my opinion, it feels like football or baseball movies.
Yeah.
Huh. And they're usually all dramas as well. Like the one big actor star, like Ben Affleck in The Way Back, as an example of a modern basketball movie, or Moneyball with Brad Pitt. They're the leads, and then the sport is kind of secondary. It's more about the drama behind it. So
we need more sports action films. Come on, get Vin Diesel in there.
That'd have to be a football movie.
Before we go to Black Widow, what sport would Vin Diesel play in a movie?
Golf.
Fencing.
Okay. Golf? Fencing?
Very divided.
Oh, wait. I got it. Curling.
Ooh, yeah.
I like it. I would watch all these.
We got to do all the super heroic body typed men doing a curling team. Yeah. I'm into it.
They're doing the gymnastics with the ribbon gymnastics.
Oh my gosh! Well, you had me on curling because we could go a next level of action, and maybe I don't remember. Is it an iron? Is that the object in curling? The thing that they're pushing along, or cleaning along.
I think that's what it's called.
If that thing has the risk of exploding,
right
now we've got a full action sports movie.
Mm-hmm.
now, you got to get it close to that center of that ring, otherwise it's going to go off.
The entire stadium explodes and it's full of orphans. Therefore, Vin Diesel has to save the day.
Right. I've got my little broom.
Hey, curling's all about family. You know what else is all about family? Black Widow, $25.61 million, number 2, dropping down from last week. Again, we touched on it. Some of the reasons it might have dropped. There's a lot of family things going on in the box office. Even Space Jam's about family.
Mm-hmm.
Brian, you might be able to tell me a little bit more about number 3 if this one's all about family as well. Escape Room Tournament of Champions opening here at number 3, the sequel to the 2019. Was it 2019? Yeah. $8 million here opening weekend. Escape Room 2, Electric Boogaloo.
Is this like a? It sounds like a Netflix series. I've not even watched Escape Room.
This would work really well as a Netflix series,
right?
I think that if you did something episodic to that point and whatnot, I agree. I think that would something to this kind of idea, for the idea behind this movie. I do think a series would work very well. In terms of coming in at number 3, Brian is not shocked at all. I was like, you know what? I enjoyed the first one. I know I enjoyed the first one much more immensely than Casey did. And I was like, as soon as I knew they were making a sequel, I was like, I'm in. I'm going to go see it. I went 11:30 on a Friday morning, and I had the entire theater to myself. It was the only ticket for that showing.
None of the boomers were going out to watch Escape Room on Friday morning?
No, not at all.
So fill me in. Is Escape Room like a dramatization of... Is this basically like the Pirates of the Caribbean of escape rooms?
No, this is like Jigsaw meets escape rooms.
Okay.
You have a bunch of people stuck in a room, and they got to try to get to basically the end through multiple escape rooms, and hope they don't die in the process.
Okay. All right. Maybe this would be a good time.
The one thing, that upsets me with Sony is knowing that whoever cut their trailer for this, it's not that they gave anything away overall for the movie and whatnot, because they want to show like the set pieces and stuff like that. It was, putting certain people in certain scenes that you're seeing in the trailer and going, oh, this hasn't happened yet, so I know they're fine. So the trailer unfortunately made a little bit of the movie unpredictable, or made it predictable, but I still had a good time with it just because it still has its tension and glorious set pieces.
Right on.
I'm not surprised at 8.8. I really am not.
I kind of am, because I thought, I don't know. I kind of expected the next movie to still bring in a little bit more this week with Fast 9, the Fast Saga 7.62. I didn't expect Escape Room to beat this one out, but surprised me it did, and I think it's just people are obviously looking for new content out there.
Yep.
Fast 9 made a boatload of money the last couple of weeks already, and still is doing pretty well. 7.62 million is, the box office is at least looking normal.
Yeah, this 7 million right now is just to basically pay for like Vin's lunches while he was making the movie.
Right.
Everything else has just been, they've made their money back.
That they have, and more, because it's the highest grossing movie of the year so far, if I'm not mistaken. At least worldwide it is. So
I'd say if it is, Black Widow's not going to be that far behind.
We'll see. Hopefully, I think the streaming of Black Widow on Disney Plus might have thrown a wrinkle into that. We'll see how that goes with that movie going forward. And then number 5, The Boss Baby, Family Business, $4.72 million for The Boss Baby.
Because everybody needs baby Alec Baldwin and James Marsden.
Not for me, man.
Nobody needs either of those.
I don't know. I'm still on the line of evil Jeff Goldblum is kind of entertaining, to say the least.
Well, you can have evil Jeff Goldblum in other settings.
Not as an evil baby.
We'll find a way.
Just like Jurassic Park, life will find a way.
Yep, life will always find a way.
They can clone him in a Jurassic Park movie and just stitch his face onto a baby in the next Jurassic Park or Jurassic World, and he's an evil baby then.
They resurrect him through a clone, but they don't have enough human material, so he's like part human, part dinosaur. And he looks like the baby from Disney's Dinosaurs.
And until they realized that they weren't paying attention and the sample got contaminated when a fly flew in.
Oh my, yeah.
And now it's the Fly 3 surprise.
Welcome to cinema.
This is how executives make movies at Disney, I'm sure.
Is that how we ended up with Glass? I'm gonna make Split and just gonna put it in and make it part of a trilogy that nobody knew I was making.
Right.
Yeah, I had a conversation about that movie the other day. Glass grows on me more and more because of how ballsy that movie is.
Very much so. It definitely is that.
But we're not talking about Mr. M. Night Shyamalan. That's next month. But that is next month. But right now, that is the box office for the week. But let's move on to the news. Couple fun little pieces of news that we had going on here in the past week. Brian, what do we got first?
Well, the first thing we have deals with the infamous Indiana Jones number 5, and that is Antonio Banderas joins the cast. Because if you're not going to have one aging action star in this movie, you might as well have two. Like, I kind of want to see Antonio Banderas like he was in The Expendables 3, where he's the guy that he wants to be in the action, but they won't let him in the action because he's already kind of past his prime. But, you know.
Well, you can't do that when freaking Harrison Ford's 90 years old still cracking that whip.
No, that's what I'm saying. I mean, they're both going to go retire in the nursing home when they get done with the movie.
Yeah, I can't perceive exactly what his role adjacent to Indiana will be, but
he just shows up on screen and Indiana Jones is like El Mariachi.
Oh my God! Yes.
Surprise! It's directed by Robert Rodriguez.
Would watch that.
Prediction: they're rivals, but at the end, they're best friends.
Because it's all about family. Finds out Antonio Banderas is his long lost brother.
Yeah.
Sean Connery got around. He was down in Mexico for a while,
and so he'll be named after some place in Mexico. So he'll be like Tijuana Jones.
Jones.
Hey, you know what? It's not like James Bond never slept around. So the fact that he's probably got kids throughout the world is not surprising.
Right.
This is how we get all our Indiana Jones spin-offs. It's just the Jones family.
Yep.
His dad.
And then it just turns into Fast and the Furious with treasure.
My last name's not Toretto. It's Jones.
Oh, man. Okay, I'm in.
All right, let's do it. Everything will eventually connect to the Fast and the Furious saga at some point.
Because, you know, they didn't show us the Apollo 13 or something like that flying by in Fast 9. Next thing we have an update from Paramount in terms of a new Star Trek movie and that WandaVision director Matt Shakman to helm the next movie. I'm not sure which he did in WandaVision, so I don't know where I see this going just as of yet. I haven't looked too much into it.
He's the creator of WandaVision.
Is he the creator?
He's the big brain behind it all.
Okay, then I'm good with that.
He directed, if not all of it, most of it.
So there's a possibility we're going to have sort of a
Twin Peaks feel.
Yeah, I was just gonna say like a weirder Star Trek film, which there's plenty of room for that, so I don't see it being a problem.
Let him direct the Tarantino script that's floating around there.
Oh my goodness! Yeah.
Again, Star Trek is kind of at a point where I think they're trying to restructure on what they're doing next, because it seems like obviously they had the new television show that's been doing pretty well. Star Trek Discovery.
Yep.
Yeah.
So.
But the last film was what, Star Trek
Beyond.
And that was a few years ago already. So I think they're already trying to restructure what they're doing next with Star Trek, because this has been announced. I know Tarantino has obviously been teasing his Star Trek script at least for a while. That's maybe gonna happen, maybe not. Who knows? I know there was another version of Star Trek pushed around out there as well. Who knows what's going to happen? So I think they're just in a restructure mode for what they're doing next for Star Trek. But I think from what it sounds like, this still falls in the Chris Pine universe of Star Trek movies.
Oh, in the Kelvin timeline or whatever they called it thing. Which I'm completely okay, because that's where I think between Shatner's Star Trek and Patrick Stewart's, they had their your respective movies and whatnot, that I still think there's so much still yet to be able to be done with Chris Pine and Zachary Quinto, Carl Urban, Zoe Saldana, all of them. The only thing obviously is that I hope, and they've commented this here before, is that if they do keep with that timeline and keep with that cast, that they would be respectful to Anton Yelchin and not recast him, which I think is it's a ballsy move, because it's a very integral character that's been around since the dawn of Star Trek. But if they keep with the same cast and whatnot, I really do hope they do that, just because I would say it partially does a disservice to Anton's character that he created for that version of Star Trek.
Yeah, I'm not the biggest Star Trek fan, so I'm very curious what they want to do with Shackman as the guy behind the next one, because I did really like WandaVision. I thought it was a nice departure from the MCU formula until it was just part of the MCU formula in the last episode. But besides that, I thought the entire series was really great, and kind of one of my favorite Marvel things that they've put out in the last while. And it's obviously because of Shackman, who put together this idea of doing the television show WandaVision together, and I'm excited to see what he would do with Star Trek. I would kind of like to see them step away from Pine and do kind of just a different version of Star Trek. Get away from Captain Kirk and Spock for a little bit. Let's do something somewhere else in the universe of Star Trek. Let's see what else is going out in that universe. I
think that if they were to do something to that effect, they're going to dip their toes into what has been working on television, like say Discovery, for example, in terms of characters or stories or something like that, other than going with something completely new for theatrical, because I don't think Paramount would take that risk. I think that they would either stick with the Kirk Spock because that's what everybody knows, or like in the instance of like Next Generation and the next batch of Star Trek movies, they lean to what they did in television. So if they do stray away from and don't do the cast of like the Pine stuff and whatnot, they're definitely going to go with something that has been that has worked on television. So like Sonequa Martin Green, for example, for like Discovery, I could see maybe transitioning over to more film stuff like she did with Space Jam.
Oh yeah, she's in that. I think Star Trek can sell by itself, and then you throw in one or two movie stars, and it'll sell. Like throw in Vin Diesel, throw in Tyrese, throw in Ludacris. I don't know. Let's just do Star Trek Fast and the Furious crossover. I mean, we're halfway there. Throw in Elon Musk in a cameo.
He's the big bad.
It'd be fun. I would like that. And Jeffrey Bezos can sneak in as our like after credit scene of like, surprise, I'm the big mastermind. I'm the Thanos of this Star Trek Fast and the Furious universe.
When does Zuckerberg show up and look like Data from Next Generation?
Well, he's obviously on the ship.
Yeah. I mean, all they have to do, they don't have to give him other than just a slight sheen of like gold to his skin, because everything else is already there.
Yeah.
So make it happen, Hollywood.
Right. But that's all we really had this week. Not a whole lot going on.
So speaking of movie magic, like we just pitched there with Star Trek Fast 9 meets Jeffrey Bezos and Elon Musk, we're going to talk about Pete's Dragon from 1977. A much simpler time back then.
But
in
hold
1977.
on. It's still about family.
It is.
So that seems to be the theme of today's show.
That's the theme of our podcast. It's family.
This whole like last few weeks, because of what's been releasing in the theaters and everything like that, it seems to be that's what the case has been. Because I mean, even what fell off of this week's top 5 is The Purge, which is a husband and wife and a couple of families trying to get to safety and salvation in The Purge. I'm like, it's all been family for like 5 weeks now.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So it only seems right we're talking about a straight up family picture here with Pete's Dragon. I said this before we even started recording that Dylan, you're going to have to be our expert here because surprise, this is a first time watch for both Brian and myself.
So I want to preface, like I did once, like you said before the show, I hadn't watched it for like 25 years until last night, and I had just finished a convention in Des Moines, and I was hanging out with a friend and my wife, and we were drinking and watching the movie while like doing deep dives through Wikipedia as it played. So I hope I can rise to your expectations.
This seems like a kind of movie you want to get drunk to.
It absolutely is. Oh my goodness. I don't even know where do you want to start? How do we want to pull this off?
So let's start with 1977. This is when this movie came out. We maybe should start with what Disney was doing at this time. This is the weird Disney phase, the weird Disney era of Disney taking some risks, some big risks out there. Their animation department is kind of struggling at this point. They're really leaning heavy into the live action, especially the live action adventure type of movies, live action musicals. And this movie has both of those. While they also are combining the animation into a lot of these live action movies, especially probably most predominantly here with Pete's Dragon 1977. So maybe we'll touch on the plot and then we'll get into it. So it's pretty simple plot.
Yeah, and to back up a little bit of that historical stuff, apparently they had begun working on a concept in 57 and shelved it pretty quickly until 77, well, around 77 when it released to bring it back out. So Disney had been fiddling with the short story that was originally titled Pete's Dragon and the USA Forever After, which is a nightmare title.
Can you imagine how well this would have sold in 77 if that would have been the title?
Right? I would do a lot better in 2019. But, yeah. So, yeah. What an interesting time to tell a story like this, especially where it's leaning so heavily on live action.
Disney in 57 is like, we want to make this story, but we have no idea how to do it.
I wonder
because because you figure for the sake of practical effects and whatnot in the 50s, this would have looked really bad. Probably.
Right.
I mean, a few years after this, when this initial concept came up, they were doing Mary Poppins and knocking it out of the park with, one of the most iconic movies of all time.
But Mary Poppins, for the most part, doesn't have maybe except for like when they're in the whole like animation scene or whatever. Otherwise, it's just like little bits. It's not like full on character in Mary Poppins. But like you said, though, too, Mary Poppins is what kind of drove Disney, I think, into this direction because Mary Poppins was so successful. They're like, oh, we can do live action and animation at the same time. Kind of like the live action remakes they're doing now. They're like, we found a thing, so let's keep doing that.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if this would have been possible without the addition of Don Bluth. I don't know if either of you know that, but the animator famously behind like Five Goes West, American Tail, and like Rockadoodle was an animation director for Pete's Dragon. So.
And All Dogs Go to Heaven. Shout out to All Dogs Go to Heaven.
Right. So they had somebody who was, I think this might have been the beginning of him working in this crossover realm.
Yeah.
So
I mean, if that at least says anything about this movie and whatnot, is throwing his name out at least shows that there is a solid like base of, this is a guy that knows what he's doing. Because I mean, even for me, like growing up, you said one of the ones that I grew up into this day. I still own the DVD right now, and that's American Tail. Right. Because if there's anything Don Bluth was great at was those, not necessarily like adult animated movies at the time, whatever, but like a kids movie that didn't feel necessarily like a kids movie. It really did touch on.
It wasn't looking down on kids. Like
Right.
it was treating them like human
Yeah.
beings. It wasn't treating them like they're a dumb kid.
Exactly.
And telling stories that were less like fairy tales and more like, this is people's lives. They just happen to be animals. And
Yep.
Yeah,
So-
so that matters before we get into the plot. I just may want to start there at some point.
And also, like, Disney has always been known for trying to push the envelope of what they can do on film. It wasn't, obviously Mary Poppins wasn't even the first time they combined, live action and animation. They were doing that way before. They were doing that before Mickey Mouse was even invented. So it was something Walt Disney was always pushing for. And obviously animation has been a huge part of the Disney lexicon from inception till right now. And it's really fascinating to see it grow, especially in this weird time period of the 70s where animation wasn't the focus. But for me, this movie, the animation's the best part of the movie. And we'll get into that. But I do like to see that they took a focus on integrating the animation styles into this movie here, especially since they were pushing live action musicals, live action adventures during the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
So let's jump into the plot then. The plot follows a young orphaned boy, Pete, who lives with this grimy, gross family called the Gogans, and they are just a gross group of rednecks living out in the woods. And basically,
can they at least get in the river and like clean off for a little bit?
They already had their bath in May.
That's something that kills me about this movie is in order to effectively tell you that like these people are like gross or filthy, they make them absolutely like pigsty filthy.
Yeah.
Oh, to the point like you hit the one on the head and there's the big poof of dust.
Yes. Yeah. And you got to think a little bit like at the time they were planning for a quality that you need to exaggerate things for people to be able to interpret exactly what's happening. And now we're watching it on like a 4K TV and it seems sort of surreal.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that it kind of struck me as like a play almost.
Mm-hmm.
The whole film felt like a stage play.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I felt that too. Like all, especially the musical productions, feel like a stage musical production more than a filmed musical production.
Absolutely.
And then,
in terms of that and whatnot, I mean, you figure in that time from between like the 70s and into the 80s and stuff like that, that's primarily like what these musicals were coming out of Disney and whatnot. Because I mean, you still even feel that all the way up until the early 90s when we got Newsies.
Mm-hmm.
Newsies was, it takes place in New York. They obviously could have probably been in, done some stuff, whatever, but it's completely all stage setup and whatnot. So, but definitely the 70s, like it just screams like, this is all done on a soundstage.
Mm-hmm. So in this, Pete does have an imaginary friend that everybody else believes is imaginary, but we do find out he is very real, which is his dragon friend. And basically the two take off and run into this small town, which I'm going to mess the name up of.
Passamaquoddy,
which basically Pete. What's that?
You'll just mess it up like the villain does all the time throughout the movie.
Yeah. I probably will. Passamaquoddy.
Passamaquoddy.
And he ends up in this small town of Passamaquoddy, who basically Pete and his dragon kind of destroy the town. They disrupt the peaceful little town of Passamaquoddy until he finds a young lady there, Nora, and her father, Lampy. Oh God, Mickey Rooney is in this movie.
Lampy's a nickname, right?
It better be. I'm going to assume so since he works the lamp in the lighthouse.
Right.
I don't know. But there he meets up with Nora and Lampy, father and daughter group who man the lighthouse in this small New England era or place town. And then we get my favorite character of this movie entering in, Dr. Terminus.
What a name. Traveling snake oil salesman named Terminus. It's like we're playing Final Fantasy. Man.
comes in singing and dancing, selling his fake meds for $1 each, giving people all the cures that they need in this small little town, which he cannot pronounce, and neither can I.
Now I'm gonna drop my like info bomb right here, because as I watched this, I was digging through actors and stuff, and we were trying to figure out like, you know, what was up with Dr. Terminus. The actor looked, you know, he had like shockingly blue eyes. His teeth were the like shiniest, whitest. He had the fewest fillings. It was like, this guy seems fancy outside of this character. So we look it up, and he is a famous British actor. His name, I just closed his tab because I'm brilliant. Give me one hot second to open
Jim Dale.
Yeah, Jim Dale.
Yeah.
Now, the thing that took me by surprise is, if there's any Harry Potter fans in your audience who listen to the audiobooks, he's the person who famously recorded all the audiobooks doing multiple voices for everybody.
Nice.
And that was like, wow, the world just wrapped around to Pete's Dragon, because I'm really up on that. And now here we are, working with Jim Dale in this really goofy this whole thing felt like a melodrama.
At first, I thought you were going to say it felt like a Mel Brooks movie.
Well, there's definitely some pieces of Mel Brooks type humor in here.
Yep.
But it stays on the cleaner side.
Dr. Terminus could be a Mel Brooks character completely.
Absolutely.
Yes, he could.
And basically the plot ends up with Dr. Terminus wants Pete's dragon to use all of the body parts, apparently for medicine, because that's in his medical book that he has, dragon parts. That is a thing. And then Pete's family, the Grogans, come back to try to take him back, because apparently he's a slave, too. That's thrown into this movie.
Because they have a bill of sale.
They do have a bill of sale. They bought him for $50 back in whenever this movie takes place. When is this movie supposed to take place, by the way? I
couldn't figure that out. It seems like it should be like turn of the 20th century. They don't ever acknowledge cars, so it seems like it's before the 1910s. But
and the whole idea of like the traveling doctor, snake oil kind of thing is very synonymous for like Old West and turn of the century as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing, I'm not an expert on boats, but I was like, these to me seem like boats that would be built in a modern time. So I kept feeling like, you know, very early 1900s, very end of the 1800s.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not exactly sure.
Yeah, that's what I was feeling too, because this movie doesn't explicitly set that up at all. In terms of when it takes place in timeline wise, I mean, like you said, the biggest notion we get is no cars are mentioned, but also there's no horses in this either. Maybe they couldn't afford horses, but they had.
That's a good point.
They had sales on the traveling doctor on his little coach that he had traveling around, and that makes me wonder why was there no horses at all in this movie? I don't know.
Maybe outside of the traveling salesman and whatnot, maybe the town is just small enough. Everybody just walks where they go. I mean, if your town is only 3 blocks wide and whatnot, do you really need transportation?
Yeah.
The soundstage was only that big, I guess.
And I got a feeling it was Maine before they even really talk about it being New England, because Maine is... I've only been to Portland, really, but there are just lobster traps everywhere. And this movie is just lobster traps are set pieces, and that's it. And I was actually shocked because, you know, there are points in the movie where you see people shuttling fish. They're never, until the end, you never really see them shuttling a lobster. And I'm like, you have more lobster traps than anything in this town. But yeah, so
it's because Elliot made them all go away.
So maybe he did. Maybe these people transport by boat more than anything else. So.
I mean, it could be, especially depending on where they're at off the coast of Maine and whatnot. It might be something where a lot of stuff is done by ferry more than it's done by any other kind of mode of transportation.
Right. And I actually I did a little diving on snake oil salesman when we learned about dragon parts and Dr. Terminus trying to, you know, figure out how to get Elliot the dragon so we can piece him out into pieces of medicine. Because I'm an avid podcast listener, and one of my favorites does a lot of history on medicine. So I was like, well, I wonder if Pliny the Elder ever wrote down like what parts of a dragon would treat whatnot. And he has at length chapters about dragons, but it doesn't tell you what parts to use to cure particular things. So I think Disney just made these things up, even though everything Pliny wrote about he made up. So
Because even the writers are like, I don't know what a dragon's toenail is gonna do for me. Let's just
how's it
forget that part."
how's it gonna rhyme in this song? Then we'll just connect it that way.
You know what? You're probably not wrong.
just got to sit down, take the song, and translate it all into a D&D campaign, and be like, look, you can use the dragon parts for all this stuff.
Pete's dragon logic. Okay, so when we get into this movie, I want to start with first of all, I want to start with probably the biggest named actor in this movie, Mickey Rooney. The first question I want to ask you guys, was Mickey Rooney just playing drunk, or was he actually just drunk on set?
I was trying to figure that out. So for me, because of the like melodrama stage play appearance of everyone, and comparing him to the Gogans, the dirty, dare I say, hillbilly people, he seemed too clean to actually be drunk. And so I wasn't convinced Mickey Rooney was actually drunk during the performance.
He seems like the type that would probably have a couple of shots just to take the edge off, though.
Sure.
Loosen himself up a little bit. But I mean, at the same time too, though, he's the kind of person who's very much about his comedic slapstick and, kind of thing where, he probably could have phoned in the drunken performance and it still would have looked like he was, 4 bottles of whiskey in for the day.
Yeah.
I think he was 4 bottles of whiskey in for the day, especially during his first musical number where he sings about seeing the dragon. Just because of it felt like he was like in a way slurring a lot of his words more than you would expect, like, even though he's playing drunk, obviously. But that musical number felt really off for me with him, especially. Because it feels like they push him to the wayside really quickly and then throw in this weird dance number on top of barrels of alcohol, which makes no sense.
The one where they're dancing on the barrels, that sequence to me was incredibly interesting because the dynamic between him and his daughter Nora are like, she's not happy, he's going berserk. But the moment she lands on top of a barrel, she's the most skilled barrel runner on the planet. And her whole attitude shifts, and she's the one riling the bar up now. So I think in her future, she'll be an alcoholic lamp tendee as well. But I had a moment where, I was drinking. I had just come off of an event. So maybe I wasn't in the right mindset. But to go a little deeper, towards the end of the number, the barrels explode and shoot beer everywhere, and it was the most sexual thing in this movie because she stomps her foot on the barrel and does a little smile, and beneath her feet is just a geyser of beer, and then all the other barrels are just geysers of beer, and there's men cheering everywhere, and I was like, there's something going on here.
Right.
Is this more of that Disney subtlety of throwing sexual innuendos into their movies, like the Little Mermaid poster?
It became a very quick debate on the couch last night.
No, don't worry, you weren't the only one that felt that. It was very weird to watch that. Okay, so that's my.
It was all for the 70s.
It was the 70s. Who knows? They were on probably a lot more than just whiskey when they were making this movie. But that's my biggest holdup I had trying to get into this movie. Some of the musical numbers felt out of place in a way, or felt like they completely are a tonal shift, especially the scene we're talking about now with Mickey Rooney yelling about seeing a dragon, and then his daughters. This is where the daughter's introduced, like the second lead of the movie. Because
this is the song. This is the third song in the film. I Saw a Dragon.
Yes. Because
the Wikipedia just has the list of all the songs, which we're talking about like 10 maybe minutes into the movie, and we're already on our third song. It opens on the song. So this movie is outrageously musical, which isn't bad, but you are right. It feels sort of disjointed. Like we have the movie happening, and then suddenly we break away into these musical numbers that are almost all of them feel like asides.
Well, I was gonna say is for me that the music aspect of it almost seemed like, hey, again, it worked for Mary Poppins. We're known for our musicals and stuff like that. We need to throw them in because that's what we do, as opposed to just making a good, solid hybrid type of movie and whatnot. Like
Hmm.
the musical numbers were, I honestly I feel were, do they contribute to the movie? Sure, but do I think they were necessary? Not at all.
So I'm wondering.
Mhm.
I don't think I will, but a little bit of me wants to go back and rewatch it and count like, do the musical numbers close off like sections of the story? Is
Mhm.
it written in a way where it's like, this particular scene or story is happening, music number, new one, music number, new one. I don't know if it was set up that way, but it kind of feels like it in hindsight. Like almost like they didn't know how to transition from one part of the story to the next without
Mhm.
using a song. So,
And it feels like some of the songs aren't necessarily pushing the plot forward in a
mhm.
way either. They just feel like, hey,
Re-
it's
They're
been 10
just
minutes.
rehashing.
It's been 10 minutes since we had our last musical number. Let's throw another one in.
Right? And the movie's 2 hours and 8 minutes long.
Right. You could have easily cut at least a third of these out and got it
Mhm.
into a relatively, 90-minute, strong, structured film.
I feel like 2 hours and 8 minutes is long in respect to like a family movie where you're expecting a kid to sit through it.
Well, especially an older family movie. Most of those stick
Yeah.
around that 90-minute mark. I'm going to look up what this might have been longer than the new Pete's Dragon. I'm going to have to.
It is. It is
It's
longer.
it
Because I
is
tried
almost
watching both last night.
it's almost 20 minutes longer. All right, that never happens. That's cool. And I felt that like length of this movie. I don't know about you guys, and I
Yeah.
think it's mostly because of some of the musical numbers. Some of these could have been shortened or completely cut out of the movie.
Yes,
Now
I agree.
I'm sure Disney ADRs and has ADR'd all of their musical numbers forever. But did either of you ever get to feel like, wow, these people are not singing these songs?
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yep.
it felt like the ADR and the acting didn't match at all. And at that point I had come to learn that one of the songs did make it into like pop music and rated number 27, I believe, on the adult alternative list, which is later in the film Candle on the Water. So I'm almost wondering if they were hoping to have like hit singles with every song, so they were like
Mhm.
super studio versions, and then there's that weird disjointed, especially with I Saw a Dragon, because I was like, wow, Mickey Rooney acting right there is not singing that song.
Yeah.
Right.
And
So
that's where I felt I'm like maybe Mickey Rooney was just plastered on set, and that's the best they could get out of him on that day.
that's a great question.
We're not going to be able to reshoot this. Just take it. We'll fix it in post.
Okay, I looked this up. I was doing I watched like a behind the scenes featurette on this movie, and they were talking about how they did some of the animation. For some reason, they went off completely on Mickey Rooney for about 5 minutes of this behind the scenes thing, of how Mickey Rooney and the gentleman who plays Red Buttons
Yeah.
go when they're going to see Pete's Dragon for the first time, and they go and they go and find Elliot in the cave, and
That's a great scene.
it is a great scene. But apparently, it was 20 minutes long the first time they shot it.
Holy, oh my god!
Because the two old actors were just trying to one up each other who could play the best drunk on the beach. And I'm like,
That I would watch.
So
I
go ahead.
I'm sorry, I wouldn't watch that. I'm sorry. There's only so much of drunk Mickey Rooney I can handle, and this movie already had too much of it.
I was gonna say that particular scene I found amazing because it gave Elliot the Dragon some really classical personality,
Mm-hmm.
because you have these two drunk guys looking for him and they're whispering the whole time, there's a dragon in here, and Elliot's like, oh my god, there's an evil dragon in here. He's scared of the dragon and they're all scared of the dragon. I don't know, it played off really well, and I noticed my friend actually pointed it out that the animation held up better in darker scenes. Like it was a little more seamless, because especially in the beginning when we're in the daylight and they're eating apples, like Elliot the dragon's not there. yeah, that scene
Yeah.
behind you, and
Yep.
in the dark, Elliot held up a little more and had, more rooted in the world. So maybe that's one of the reasons why that scene stuck out as a good scene for me. But 20 minutes of that, I don't think I'm into that either.
I'm not saying 20 minutes in the movie. I just want to see 20 minutes of that, that extended deleted scene, just because I want to see how obnoxious it was.
It would probably be entertaining in some respect if they have the whole deleted scene with no animation in it, and they're reacting to nothing, and they're both just two drunk comedians on a beach.
It's not the 20-minute scene was before they got into the cave. It was those two on the beach. It wasn't even with Elliot's yet. God knows what
script.
God knows what they would have done if they were trying to act for 20 minutes longer against the dragon that's not there. But I think that is one of the best scenes of this movie. It is definitely like the most encapsulation of what you can do with an animation family movie like this, where you have Mickey Rooney just going completely over the top with red buttons, and the two whispering to each other like you said, and then having Elliot react off that. So, in the animation style is great, like comedic stuff in this movie that we don't. That's kind of one of the rare elements that we get of like Elliot kind of being actually funny. This.
And this film is as much as a family film and it surrounds a story of an orphan. This film is like a comedy, and so if anyone listening to this has watched the new one, they are divorced from each other in that realm. The new one is not a comedy. And I think that the comedy allows you to suspend your disbelief a little bit better, because it's like this whole thing is just ridiculous. So I'm going to say, or before we even get towards the end of this, that I think this one was better. Even though it's longer and it feels disjointed, and it feels like a theatrical set, I think I kind of like this movie. I don't know about you guys, but
I can't compare because I have Pete's Dragon, the Bryce Dallas Howard version. I think, it's her, right?
Yeah.
I was like, is it her or Jessica Chastain? Because that's what we always confuse. I haven't. I've still yet to see it to this day, so I guess I can't compare. I've thought about going back to watch that so I can kind of compare it for this year and whatnot. I was like, I don't know if I have time for that.
See, we queued them both up thinking like hour 30 minutes tops kids movie, and the first one's 2 hours and 8 minutes, and we're like, well, we'll get like 10 minutes into the second one and call it a night. So yeah, but yeah. So where were we at? We were discussing the beach scene. There's a lot going on after the dragon appears, but I wanted to ask a question to you guys, because Elliot the dragon can become invisible. He seems to have a few magic powers. We don't really get to see them all. But before he becomes invisible, he's offering to Pete, like, I could just hide my wings and be a big alligator or something. And I could just hide my legs, which I found to be the most horrifying option.
Well, you mean the part where he hides his head, his legs, and his arms, so he just looks like a great big green pear?
Yes. Right? and then he chooses to be invisible. But when Lampy, Mickey Rooney, sees him, my question has been, is Mickey Rooney able to see him despite him being invisible because he's drunk? Or did Elliot reveal himself? Because there's also a moment where like kids claim they see it. And I do know that Elliot's kind of like a rascal. He's doing things he probably shouldn't do because they sort of destroy the town. So maybe he's chaotic enough to reveal himself even though he was asked not to. But I kept getting this vibe that some people could see him regardless. I don't know if either of you ever got that vibe, if that ever came in your minds.
I question the powers of the invisibility because it seems very much based in the plot, not in terms of Elliot being a magical character that can just turn it off and on. It feels very plot wise of where they want to use him being invisible.
Right.
I feel like it's so with Mickey Rooney. I think Mickey Rooney, when he's first introduced and sees Elliot for the first time, he sees him because I think Elliot is revealing himself just to talk to Pete, and then Mickey Rooney just stumbles upon it. and obviously with him being the town drunk, it seems like no one believes him.
Right,
But
you
with
can sweep that under the rug, sort
you
of
can
thing.
sweep that under the rug. It's probably not the first time he's mentioned seeing dragons or flying horses in this town. But for the kids, it seems like it's more of, oh, it's just kids. It's their imagination.
Yeah.
Because if Pete believes it's there, and he's kind of the new kid, and he's super excited about having a pet dragon, all the other classmates might feel the same way of like, oh, yeah, sure, he has a pet dragon. It's right behind him. We can see it.
That's fair. That's a good way to look at it.
When they don't see it. It's more of I think it's more of an imagination thing for them. But I think the movie could have gone further into that, where having it reveal like the only way you can see Pete is if you believe in him or something.
That would have been
Pete's
way more Disney.
With Elliot's, the only way you can see Elliot's is you believe in him. It's the power of magic that you can see him. And then that could have been the big like reveal at the end of the movie for Nora of like she finally believes because her husband's coming back or something like that.
I kind of saw it as, the reason why Lampy sees him, like you said, is that it was kind of happenstance. It was by accident, and Pete or Elliot is there to protect the kids and whatnot. So I think it's more of he let his guard down, so that's why kids can see him as opposed to the adults. When he knows he's around adults, he wants to basically keep his guard up. So that's where he's actively keeping himself invisible and whatnot, where he's talking to the kids and whatnot, he lets his guard down kind of thing.
That's a good point. Because it was just, it became a question. And the more I questioned it, the more I felt like I was seeing it. Like I was confirmation bias the whole time with that concept.
But even though he's supposed to be invisible, it would almost make more sense in terms of all the shenanigans he pulls in town, especially coming into town where he destroys the fence and throws the guy into cement. Like, just reveal yourself at that point, because otherwise there's some other weird hocus pocus going on that the town might believe this kid is bringing in with him. Because, like, especially with like ringing the bell outside the schoolhouse.
Yeah,
it's like obviously he's not, because you heard the bell before. Why do you think he's the one ringing it when he goes out there? Like, it seems like all the adults are pretty ignorant to something weird is happening, even though they can't see it. It seems like they just don't. They question that the kid is doing all this, even though obviously, if you're any normal human being who's an adult, you would obviously know. No, a kid can't destroy a fence like that, or is obviously unable to ring a bell if he's not anywhere near it.
I actually found that sequence to be one of the like best put together practical effects, especially for like the 70s. Like the fence flips up strategically, and it's all one shot if I remember correctly. It all flips up, then you see the dragon footprints in the cement. And I was like, wow, that's like really well done. Like, good on you guys.
Yeah. The other thing I'll take to those two specific pieces, though, too, is the slight running gag for the fact that this happens on multiple occasions between when Pete comes in and then when the snake oil doctor comes in.
Yeah,
they're finally got everything back and fixed, everything like that from when Elliot destroys everything. But then here comes the snake oil doctor and just screws it all up yet again and throws the guy back in the cement and all that stuff. I was hoping that maybe like there's going to be something else, because I was hoping like maybe that'll be the running gag.
So there were some good running gags, like the mayor of the town, played by Thurston Howell III from Gilligan's Island, which that was like the first thing I shouted. Was like, that's a guy from Gilligan's Island. He cannot smoke a cigar to save his life. I believe it happens 3 times, which is a big thing in comedy. Do it 3 times. Like Pete's dragon or Dr. Terminus screw it up and his cigar gets like smushed in his face. However, if you pay attention to that, I don't think he could smoke to begin with, because it's an incredibly green cigar.
Right.
It's not dry at all. So,
well, and I would even say is the fact that it's, especially if you're talking when this is coming out and whatnot, is Disney's using it for the comedic gag.
Yeah.
Because you're absolutely right. That thing was way too green. That's why the thing fell apart the way it did, because it was not dry enough. But the other thing is that it's that comedic gag that tells kids in the 70s, don't smoke.
Yeah.
Because, that's the kind of humor that, the kind of things that the subtext that we would get as kids, with stuff like that from the Disneys and the kids movies is you never saw anybody actually smoking. The guy that always tried to smoke, something would happen. So
right, pie in the face sort of thing.
Exactly. So I picture it. I picture it was a twofold thing because that's one of the things that I first noticed, especially when we get to the very end and everybody believes in the dragon even though they can't see him, and then he goes to walk in. He walks into what you can clearly see is the reflection of the plexiglass. I'm just saying.
Yeah. Oh, it's clearly there, and I don't know if that's a result of the remastered version because like everything's higher quality, so we could tell that it's there, or if you could always see it. I don't know.
Right.
I'll have to pull out an old VHS, see if it's on there.
Right.
Do you got one of those? I don't.
I actually don't have this on VHS.
My wife's mom does, and we thought about driving a couple hours to get the like old copy of it.
But in terms of like the gag with the smoking, this movie has so much drinking in it where I don't think it's like looking down upon it either. It's just this town is just a bunch of drunks because when they have the first introduction to Mickey Rooney singing that he saw a dragon, this is in the middle of the day. The bar is packed. Everybody is just smashed. This is
School is still in session.
School is in session,
and it's probably the best time to drink. But
apparently, the guys, the dads in the town, just don't work. They just go to the bar and get smashed and hear stories about dragons. This town is just a bunch of alcoholics.
Arguably, if you're just doing lobster fishing, you would check your traps in the morning, if I remember correctly, and then you'd leave them alone. So it looks like anyone who's not on a boat is just trashed all day.
Mm-hmm. So, it's just a town of a bunch of Peter Griffins in this town. Okay, let's get into... I want to get into Dr. Terminus.
Yeah.
Because...
The breakout star of the film.
I think he's the best part, like you said. Go ahead.
Now that Brian has mentioned that Terminus causes some of the same chaos, I'm almost looking at him more as like not just an antagonist, but a foil for Pete, because they both could be perceived as liars. Pete is immediately perceived as a liar. Terminus is not. Pete is not lying. Terminus is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's interesting to think about. There's something kind of nice going on there. Maybe that's one of the reasons why the character, stands out in a more positive light, even though he's the villain.
And he feels, for me, he feels more appropriate as the main antagonist of the movie, more so than the Gogans that are like the Gogans and Dr. Terminus are both over the top, but I think over the top in very different ways. Terminus is as kind of a sleazy salesman, but in a kid's type of way of like, we want to see this goofy guy get beat up by the end of it and have him get his comeuppance. But the Gogans are just gross and nasty and super over the top where they don't feel like they're a part of this universe.
They don't feel real at all.
Mm-mm. And it almost feels like the Gogans are only there to further the plot because they're like, okay, yes, Pete is an orphan, but we need to kind of provided him his origin story, if you will, kind of thing, where he's just not an orphan that just showed up one day. And they have to give a reason why he showed up. So, but otherwise, I think they didn't really serve much of a purpose other than the slapstick.
And that's
what
I was going to
from an orphanage for $15.
And they got a little sale.
Apparently, they could do that. But that's something I was going to ask. Do we need the Gogans after the opening scene?
No.
Do we need them after I think it's nice that we get introduction to his family life, know why he's on the run and wants to get out of there, why Elliot is there to help him. I think we need that for the story. Mm-hmm. They didn't need to be that over the top and have a goofy dance number out in the woods while covered in dirt. But it's a nice introduction for Pete and Elliot and understanding their story. But when they come back towards the end of the movie, it's like, well, we don't need you anymore. You're not the main villains of this. We already have Pete's foil and Dr. Terminus. We don't need you guys anymore.
And I think they did that simply for like rules of screenplay writing of like, well, you don't introduce something and not wrap it up.
Yeah. And that would be where with like the Gogans and whatnot, like if you have to do, like you said, the wrap it up kind of thing is just use them as bookends. They don't have to be in the middle. You give them the origin. the atypical show up at the end. Hey, we bought him and whatnot. Nope, he's staying here. Okay, the end.
Mhm.
You know,
Maybe we do a full like Matilda type of ending where they're trying to, get him back and are willing to offer Nora money, and she says, "How about I pay you for whatever you paid him?" And then she tears up the contract at the end, or has
Or
Elliot lighted on fire.
because this is about like family and community, perhaps they should have come at the very end to claim Pete, because that would have given the opportunity for not only Nora and Lampy to stand up and say we want Pete, but the town could have been like, nope, you're leaving. We don't care if you have a bill of sale. We want Pete here.
mm-hmm.
And that, I think that would have been like way more like he has found a real family.
More impactful.
Yeah, more impactful than Elliot just randomly holding up a power line that falls. Again, there's a power line. So again, what era does this take place?
Electricity.
There is electricity in this town.
And there are also just boat parts in the middle of town. Not like a workshop, but like there is a mast in the like town square that children climb on.
Okay, that is awesome. I every playground should have that as a center point of their playground for kids to play on. It's the most dangerous thing that they could ever climb on.
I kept getting
pretty
vibes
awesome.
of the old Pippi Longstocking when seeing that stuff. Like I kept getting weird like other things vibes throughout the different set pieces. Like when we're doing the special effects with the fence and the mud, I'm like, oh, this is like a Tom Sawyer Huckleberry Finn thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then then with all the kids, I'm like, this is just Pippi Longstocking. So I feel like Disney was trying to like they definitely didn't want to pick an era and say exactly what era. And I feel like they're trying to pick and choose like things that might be cool right now and try to like fuse them into this world. But maybe I'm wrong, because this is what 50 years ago.
Speaking of, I want to bring up a great set piece in this movie, and it's one that I also don't think is needed in the movie, but I think it looks incredible. Is the Brazzle Dazzle Day song that they sing on top of the lighthouse, because that is also shot on the soundstage. But for me, that scene especially felt like, oh, are they actually shooting at a lighthouse? Like, are they actually in Maine or in New England areas shooting that?
Is that where they're cleaning the lighthouse?
Yeah, the song's not needed in the movie.
No, it's unnecessary.
I'm not defending the song, but I'm defending the set piece. It looks great.
Mm-hmm.
It's the most unnecessary song of the movie, and maybe the most awkwardly choreographed too.
Yeah, it is weird.
Like their butts keep hitting the windows of the lighthouse for no reason, and it's really weird.
They deliberately like rub their butts on the windows because they're cleaning. It would be fine if this was like fully animated like Jungle Book, because it's like, oh cool, it's bears cleaning with their butts. But like it felt a little weird. Like having drunken Mickey Rooney rub his butt on a window. But
he just did that when he showed up on set that day, and they're like, let's make a musical number out of that.
Keep it in there.
Let's just keep it in there. I saw stuff like that, and like how weird over the top that stuff was, especially when they're at the lighthouse with like Mickey Rooney and whatnot. And all I could have was visions. And I blame Casey for this here, though, is having visions of Willem Dafoe from The Lighthouse.
Oh, man.
And I'm like, when is the weird siren going to show up? When's the tentacle stuff going to show up?
That would make this movie wild. I think one of the things is, when you guys compared this to Mary Poppins earlier, scenes like that happen in Mary Poppins, but Mary Poppins does the infused animation throughout all of its like ridiculous stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And this movie, like you said earlier, the only animated thing is Pete's dragon, Elliot, aside from like one or two things that Elliot picks up and touches, like those become animated, which is a smart move. But knowing that, like anytime this movie gets ridiculous without the dragon there, it's just weird. Like it loses all rooting.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that lighthouse scene is exactly like the most powerful example of it, just losing track of itself.
That's when the studio and the writers were tripping on acid that day.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And again, and that doesn't take away from, because I think Nora is a really great character in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I don't think Pete's given a whole lot to do besides being kind of like the cute kid who's kind of naive and innocent. But he's not really given an arc, where Nora at least gets an arc in the movie.
Yeah.
That's where I like her character, and she at least has a nice backstory, and that kind of ties into everything by the end, obviously, with her husband coming back on the ship that he's apparently just, again, plot reasons, has been gone on the sea, crashed, was the only survivor, doesn't remember anything, and then apparently Elliot must have flipped over his bed and he hit his head again and remembered everything? Is that what we're supposed to believe?
I think so. And I had trouble even knowing her husband existed, and I don't know if it's because I looked away at the wrong moment, but was the reveal that he was a thing really brief?
There was a picture of him when they're going up, when Pete's going up to the top of the lighthouse for the very first time, and she's basically like, I don't want to talk about it.
Yeah. Okay, I must have missed that entirely, because when he came back, I'm like, what's this all about?
Like, it is honestly kind of a dropped line of her saying, yeah, he's lost at sea, let's move on.
Yeah, pretty much. And I like, for the simple fact that, he does finally show up and be like, but you've been gone for this time. And it's like 2 lines of dialogue. This is why. And
rogue wave hit my head.
Right.
Yeah.
And then apparently Elliot the dragon flipped my bed over and I hit my head again. I'm okay.
And I just magically remembered everything.
That's classic film bolognium.
Mm-hmm.
Grade A bolognium.
Yep.
Oh, so when we get to the climax of this movie at the lighthouse, we'll get to that part first, and then we'll get to the Dr. Terminus stuff. At the lighthouse, where it's kind of the big climactic moment, is Pete's dragon Elliot trying to light the wick of the lighthouse. That's the big climactic moment.
I was just going to ask you, is there a climax to this movie?
Not really.
Just in the bar scene where all the barrels explode.
Yeah. I swear to God, watch that. Think about it.
So you're saying this movie climaxed too soon?
Yeah.
It did. But like in terms of a movie climax, no, I don't think there is one, because again, the climax should have been with Dr. Terminus.
Yeah.
And the family.
There's a pseudo climax with him.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we'll get to it later. The wick scene was weird.
Like, it felt more appropriate if, like, Elliot had a fight against the storm to go rescue her husband from sea or something like that. Like, that's what I thought I was going for. Instead he has to fit his fat butt through the lighthouse and light a wick.
Yeah, and
then we don't even see the
struggle those shoots of flame.
We don't even see the ship like get boarding land. We don't see the husband until 5 minutes later, where he's in town now and not that. Like, where did he go between those two scenes?
Yeah,
right.
Could Elliot not just fly into the storm and just pick up 2 random dudes on a boat?
Right. It could have been like a small boat, a small rowboat comes to town, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, the boat your husband was on, all this trouble, we got to save him." And then Elliot and the family go save him. That would have been better, but also entirely unnecessary.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if it's a product of its time, but Nora was fine without having a husband.
Yeah.
And again, that could have been the character arc her character arc is really set before her husband comes back, of now believing Pete and understanding he's a part of their family.
And, wouldn't that be shocking? You go to work one day, you come home, and your significant other's like, "Look, I brought home this 11-year-old, and we're gonna keep him forever."
And he has a pet. He has a pet dragon too.
Yeah. Trust me, it's real.
I've been gone for a year, and we got a kid. Wait a minute, huh?
Well, the people I took him from paid $15.
I got him for free. Score. Andy paints our lighthouse for us.
Oh my gosh, they don't know how to paint anything.
No,
the behavior of the actors while painting is obscene, because
especially Pete, just the whole
they're going up and down the siding of the lighthouse, just like thud, 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 with brushes. It's like, this is not painting.
Okay, so besides being treated, he's treated much better with Nora and Lampy. That's not a real name.
In an animated version of this would be the lamp in the lighthouse.
Oh, they should have done that. But he's treated much better with them, but he's still doing the same manual hard labor that he was doing with the Gauguin family.
Yeah.
Has much changed for young Pete. Now he doesn't even have his dragon anymore.
They bathe him and they sing together while they work. So maybe it's a little better.
Well, and it's the kind of thing too where like he might be working, he's doing his chores, if you will, but it's not like he's being forced to do these things. He's working along with her while they're painting the lighthouse and stuff like that. So it's more of a collective effort as opposed to just like we bought him for $15 so he could do all of our bidding because we're too lazy to do it ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I guess there's that argument that Nora enrolls him in school with a teacher who doesn't want him, and tells him, like, he's like, what if I don't like school? And she's like, well, do you want to be an idiot? Like, literally, she says like that.
Yeah.
And he's like, I guess I'll like it then. Like, wow, parenting.
I do like when they show up, he goes, because he doesn't have certain things, whatever. He can multiply. What's 9 times 9? 81.
Yeah, right.
How many pounds are in a ton? 2,000.
Yeah, he's like real into that.
Can I come in now?
Yeah, where'd he learn that stuff?
From the dragon.
And back then, everything is just like, oh yeah, that was lost in a fire. Oh, his birth certificate. Well, the fire from over here hit that over there, so that went up in flames too. Like,
Right.
Because why not, right?
And the teacher puts him in a dunce cap. I really want to know if that ever actually happened to anybody.
That was a real thing.
I'll
And
say
getting
dunce-
smacked, your hand smacked with the ruler.
I knew
that
about
was
the ruler thing. My wife said the dunce cap was real, but it just seems so, like, weird.
It is weird.
Things were a little weird back then, though, too.
Also,
Yeah.
a weird line in this movie is Pete saying the most fun he's ever had is while painting the lighthouse.
Yeah.
It's like, couldn't that line have come like with him like after school, hanging out with other kids or something like that, or singing with Nora? Like, no, it's just painting the lighthouse, doing manual labor that he was doing with the other family too. It's just now he's conditioned, like Tom Sawyer told him it was the coolest thing ever.
Yeah,
Now
right.
he thinks painting is the funnest thing he's ever done.
Okay, so dunce caps give us a timeline. This movie couldn't take place historically any later than the 1950s because that's when they fell out of favor. So it's pre-1950s.
They should bring back the dunce
Probably.
caps.
Yeah, absolutely. You should have to bring your own to school and you give permission to take it off.
Mm-hmm. prove that you're not a dunce.
Yeah, what a violent concept we just created.
Let's get to the climax with Dr. Terminus and the Gogan family. The Gogans get their comedic comeuppance by landing in a barrel of like oil and sludge.
Yeah, tar?
Yeah,
I wasn't exactly sure. It was very wet, but like vividly black. So it was like ink almost. But barrels of it.
And again, too over the top for me with them. Like, again, we didn't need them. It might have been more appropriate if they showed up at the end, like way at the end of the movie, like where the town has finally embraced Pete and Elliot, and then the Gogans show up of like, hey, we found you. You're coming back with us. And then the town's like, no, go away. We don't want you.
Yeah, it could have been as simple as that to just like tell us that this is a family now.
And for Dr. Terminus, his whole plot of catching the dragon doesn't need the family. He just needs Pete, and he already knows Pete, obviously, and knows where he lives, and knows how to lure him into getting the dragon.
Right.
Like, there's a much easier villain plot for Dr. Terminus out there than what he decided to go through, of then kidnapping Pete, giving him to the family, and then having Hoagie Red Buttons go and get Elliot for some reason instead of using Pete as bait.
Yeah.
It's very, very nonsensical the way Dr. Terminus goes about his villain plot.
It is nonsensical, and it almost feels like at some point in the concept that he would have like known the Gogans better, or like somehow schemed with them earlier on. Because the fact that they're just suddenly working together is kind of weird.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's all built on the crux that his medicinal book. I think he thinks that having the dragon parts will legitimize him because he's selling people garbage. He tells that one guy, take 12 doses a day of a bottle that's like 8 ounces and then call me when it runs out. And it was $1. So he basically wants $1 a day out of these people.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he thinks the dragon will legitimize him because he'll have like near endless parts to like cure people's ailments.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe that's why he's so desperate to get Elliot. But yeah, I think it was very weird how they chose to have him pursue Elliot, And then one of the things I wanted to note about acting is Red Buttons is a great actor, but it was pointed out to me last night that he looks at the camera a lot. And I wonder what was up with that. He did come from Broadway. I looked into him, so maybe it was from looking at the audience. But Red Buttons is like Jim Halpert the whole time.
Because in the 70s, nobody cared if you broke the fourth wall.
Right?
And again, I think it just goes into the kind of over-the-top nature of the movie, where maybe that's something they kind of just didn't care that ended up in the final cut.
That might have been. But ultimately, the Red Buttons or Hoagie captures Elliot and brings him into like the dock house. That's where, they don't really explain that set piece very well, but it's some sort of like boathouse, dock house, and that was when I came to a conclusion that I don't know if they actually had finished designing Elliot the Dragon before filming the movie, because it was an impressive practical effect where they have like all of these nets on him, but on the dragon, but he's invisible, and so you see his form, but you don't see the dragon. But the form under those nets is like lither, longer. His neck is, to me, seemed much longer. His head more like narrow, and it felt more like a European dragon to me. And doing a little bit of research, that apparently they wanted to embrace more like Chinese aesthetics so that it would look friendlier. So they didn't have some sort of like D&D monster running around with Pete. But I feel like, at least in that scene, the people who crafted that practical effect didn't really know what Elliot looked like, because it was a very different form.
He's also about 2 or 3 times bigger than he shows up when he's with Pete.
Yeah.
There too. Like, I think it's a great practical effect. It's just a little jarring because how many times we've already seen Elliot beforehand, and we know what he looks like, obviously. So,
my fan theory is that that's a different dragon under there.
I would say that's one of the first things I noticed when they dropped that net. I was like, oh yeah, cool practical effect, especially the waving back and forth of his head and whatnot. But that's one of the things I noticed too. It was like, he's not a brontosaurus.
Yeah.
His neck isn't 7 feet long. Like, you could definitely tell, and that could be whether or not they knew of what Pete was going to look like, then like you said, that the practical effect, maybe the scene was filmed before was the finished design of Pete, of Elliot and everything like that. I think it also possibly being, considering the times that, when this movie is made and everything like that, they're like, okay, these are the aesthetics we know we need to get out of the scene. We want to see him withering around. We need have his head move around. What could they physically do on the practical effects side to make that happen, regardless of what they know? They'll probably be like, kids are going to be watching this movie. They're not going to care that magically his neck is 7 feet long.
Right. The dragon, the form of the dragon under those nets is very similar to the design of the dragon in the newer film. Because the new dragon is friggin' gigantic, whereas in this version, Elliot is maybe 15 feet tall, which is still big.
Maybe they are set in this connected universe, and there are 2 different Elliots out there that are both dragons, and they just caught the wrong one in this one, and he escaped, ended up going into 2016 and finding a different kid.
So my argument is
Loki.
The new one. Can I spoil a little bit of the ending of the one we watched for this? So in the end, Pete gets family, and Elliot has to go away. And there's this sort of line where Pete's like, "There's another kid out there, isn't there?" And Elliot basically says yes, because we haven't said this, but Elliot doesn't speak in this movie. He makes like pseudo Scooby-Doo noises, and
love the clicking.
Yes, and he basically confirms there's some other kid out there who needs him. They could have pulled a Mary Poppins 2 and just been like, same dragon, new kid. Like Gregory's dragon. Go to town.
Absolutely.
I think that would have been a little bit more successful. But, yeah. I think I just tangented myself into a hole there.
Well, and that could have been like how they could have sequelized this, is just it's Elliot going on different adventures with other kids. Like, why is there not a Pete's Dragon animated series of Elliot the Dragon?
Yeah.
And
That's a good point.
I'm gonna go into my kind of final thoughts that I want to bring up here is when we finally get the comeuppance for Dr. Terminus, the best character in this entire movie. He also yells out a goofy scream.
Yeah,
and,
there's a goofy holler.
and I love it. And I wish there was more.
Recreate it?
I can't recreate it. I will never try to. Actually, I have many times, but I will not try to on this podcast. But it was the one time in this movie where I had a smile on my face, and maybe that's just because I'm a old prick now. But it put a smile on my face to hear the goofy yell in this movie.
Yeah, that was almost just like Disney hard winking, like, don't forget we made this.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Like we could have done a Wilhelm scream. No, we're gonna do Goofy.
Yeah. I wouldn't have been surprised by either, but I was. It was like, oh yeah, I guess they would do the Goofy holler.
Mm-hmm.
I was looking. I tried to pay attention because Red Buttons had a catchphrase, which was "Never got a dinner." Did Hoagie ever say that in this movie? Did anybody notice?
What was it? Never got a dinner?
Yeah, it was basically in reference to the fact that he had never had like a celebrity roast. If I understood the context correctly.
Huh, interesting. I don't know if I ever noticed that. At least in this anyway.
Now I'm kind of tempted to like scrub through it and just watch his scenes and see if he ever says it.
Mm-hmm.
But what'd you think of the ending where Elliot has to go away and all that stuff? Did that feel like really quick to you? Did it feel like they were just trying to like let's end the movie?
It did. It felt like they were trying to pull on the heartstrings, but then immediately goes into Goofy territory of hey, you're supposed to be invisible. Oh, look, there is a dragon. It is real. Like
Yeah.
It's the one moment of the movie where it's like trying to pull on your heartstrings, and it's immediately back to the Goofy over the top movie that it was before.
So now maybe you're right. Maybe if the invisibility was based on belief, it would have been better, because then as he flies over the city or whatever, everybody is like, oh my gosh, there really was a dragon, because like the whole town finally believes.
You know, granted, and you say that, and I like that premise, except I'd want to have it end with you got that one guy that still is like, what's everybody looking at?
Yeah, or you cut to they see the dragon flying away, and then they see a bunch of like red dragons flying toward them, and they're like, oh, and then it's over. we shouldn't have believed that hard. That's for when I integrate this with the Fast and the Furious universe.
Vin Diesel and crew come in riding on dragons.
Yeah.
Hey, we still have a couple more Fast and Furious movies. You know, we already called Going to Space.
I'm telling you, after Star Trek, they're gonna go straight up Game of Thrones,
medieval
Fast and the
style.
Furious. Yeah.
They'll go back further. Even they'll do like Ben-Hur chariot racing.
What are you talking about? Vin Diesel's going to be riding a Tyrannosaurus Rex in prehistoric times.
That'd be amazing.
Mm-hmm. That's where we get Jeff Goldblum as the fly baby dinosaur.
Yes. Oh my God. It's full circle.
All connected, and somehow Vin Diesel ends up riding Elliot by the end of the movie.
Exactly.
Movies, we love them. Let's make all these happen. Let's get into our final thoughts. Pete's Dragon, 1977. I'll start with my final thoughts. I think this movie is a bit of its time. It's a little bit
dated.
tonally off. I think the animation is really great with Elliot. He's kind of the shining spot of at least the story. Of anytime Elliot's on screen, it's at least coherent, and we're actually moving the plot forward. Why is there not a musical number where he starts singing? Like, he's kind of only in one musical number in the beginning of the movie.
And
why
the
is he not
number is
more?
named after him. It's like ba 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 bum or something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like, why isn't he introduced more into the musical numbers? Because there's what, like a dozen of them in this movie, something 13? Like that. Jeez.
The animators are like, we can't animate a dragon to do that.
Again, there's a lot of things I was wondering what was going on in the backstage of Disney at this point, especially with this movie. But again, the reasons to watch it: animation with Elliot. I think he's the best part. Some of the set design and production design is really incredible, like the lighthouse, the weird ship that's in the middle of town, like Dylan said. Like, it's just cool that's there. That seems cool. The entire town is really cool that they built on the backstage at Disney. And then I think Dr. Terminus is like the reason to watch this, as like this fun, over the top classic Disney villain throughout the movie. Has great he gets 2 musical numbers throughout this, which is kind of rare for a Disney villain. They kind of get their big one of like, I'm the bad guy song. No, he gets 2. He gets an introduction song, and he gets a song about tearing a dragon into pieces and using its body parts. So
that's what you do, right?
He is definitely the reason to watch this, but kind of going expecting that this movie's kind of all over the place, and look for the bright and shining spots of the movie. Brian, what do you got
about this movie?
About your final thoughts on this movie here? Yes,
this movie. It's one of those ones where I think my disconnect with the movie is this movie is literally a year older than I am. And this is the first time you watching this movie. So I'm in my 40s. I'm watching this movie. And so I don't think I have that same connection to it like I should have if had I watched this when I was a kid. So I don't think I get that nostalgia factor. Like, for instance, like I've referenced Newsies before, granted that's like 92. But like I have more of a connection to like Newsies than I do this here, and this one has been around a lot longer. So, again, I think for the sake of the animation, what they're trying to do, and the type of movies we were getting out of Disney in the 70s, I think it lines up pretty well. I definitely would recommend people at least checking it out if they haven't seen it, just because it does kind of show you as you've watched Disney movies throughout the years and the decades, how they've progressed and how they've modified the formula from year to year to decade to decade. And this is a good way just to, what did the 70s look like then, when they made this movie and going forward.
Dylan, what about you? What's your final thoughts? Having watched this as a kid, and then now watching it this time, like you said, over 20 years later.
So growing up in the tail end of the 80s and throughout the 90s, movies like this as a kid felt ancient. Like this movie is from hundreds of years ago. It doesn't quite have that feel to me anymore, but it definitely does feel of its time. Like you said, Brian, it doesn't. I don't really know if kids would be into it now. Yeah, and I try to put myself in that situation a lot. I've reviewed TV shows on a podcast before and tried to do every episode. Like, does this connect with kids? I'm not sure if this does, but for me, I think the film is fun. I think there's definitely a disconnect between what makes a good movie and whether or not I like it. Because there are great movies that are like, that's not for me. This isn't a great movie. It's not a bad movie. I do like it. And once again, I was trying to sort of like compare the two versions to try to get more of a feel for this one. This has that like slapsticky off the wall Disney heart that everyone especially up until like the 2010s, everyone was like looking for. I think that's one of the challenges with Disney's live action is like they can write cartoons and they write cartoons when they write live action. And sometimes that feels real weird. And, so it has that, but it's definitely disjointed. But I do think, I think I like this better than the new one. So I'll put it there.
Right on. Last question for all three of us here. If you were to pair this with another movie, because I love double features, if you are going to pair Pete's Dragon from 1977 with another movie not called Pete's Dragon from 2016.
Darn it! I'm just kidding.
What would you pair it with?
I'll go first. I think I would pair it with another Don Bluth animation, and I'm gonna pick another like blends into like live action, and we'll go with Rock-a-Doodle. And I would say, if you haven't watched Rock-a-Doodle, be ready for some things that are amazingly well done and things that are like, you didn't have budget left, did you? So, yeah.
I don't know if I even know that movie.
Rock-a-Doodle. I haven't watched that since I was a kid. Jeez.
Yeah. Skip the credit sequence, and you'll be fine.
I was going to say, there's two Don Bluth movies that I haven't watched probably since I was like 6 years old. One is that, Rock-a-Doodle, and the other is All Dogs Go to Heaven.
Oh, man. All Dogs Go to Heaven, solid. I think the only way you can pick up Rockadoodle if you want to get it on DVD is with Pebble and the Penguin in a 2-pack, and Pebble and the Penguin is not great. So,
Brian, what do you got? Otherwise, I got a weird one. I got a weird double feature I would do.
What's your weird double feature?
So I'm gonna start with Pete's Dragon first, and then I'm gonna pair it with another movie that features a lighthouse. It's not the lighthouse, but it features a lighthouse pretty predominantly throughout the movie. Also set in the New England, I believe it's also set in Maine, and it is also about a kid who has something imaginary that other people do not believe is also there. Darkness Falls from 2003, the Tooth Fairy horror movie.
Yeah. Wow.
We're going to go completely different. You're going to start with Pete's Dragon.
So bad.
I love Darkness Falls. And yeah, you're going to start with Pete's Dragon, and you're going to end the night with Darkness Falls. Both, I guess, in a way, similar in stories. I don't know.
There's a master's thesis right there, is comparing those two films.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Darkness Falls. I love that stupid, horrible movie.
I swear, like every 6 months, you figure out a way to cram that horrible movie into something.
Darkness Falls and Blair Witch 2: Book of Shadows are like my two big, like, these are unsung masterpieces of horror that no one understands.
Yeah, and the part Darkness Falls is I enjoyed that movie up until I figured out it was the Tooth Fairy, and I'm like, this is stupid.
It's much better than the Tooth Fairy with The Rock.
Yeah.
Yes, but that still gives us the opportunity to say Dwayne The Rock, the Tooth Fairy Johnson.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, Darkness Falls is one of those blind buys I wish I had kept walking. So I do have one for once here, Casey. I did think of one that wasn't just going pair it with Mary Poppins, because that was too easy. I want to pair it with one that's kind of we still have that old timey kind of, shipping port kind of thing going on right now. And I want to put it with, what year is this here? 1980s Popeye with Robin Williams and Shelley Duvall.
That would fit pretty weirdly well with this, I think.
Yes. Because my brain was like, Mary Poppins. I'm like, all of a sudden just light bulb. I'm like, no, I want Popeye. Like, Popeye is one of those ones I love going back to every so often. It's just it does have that weird campiness that is kind of like this here. But they knew it. They knew they knew what the property was they were making. Like, they know it's going to be campy, it's going to be over the top, and that's one thing I love about it. And I think, like I said, because of like the threshold of the kind of the town, if you will, being kind of like the centerpiece to it and whatnot, and being able to pair that with this.
I could see it being good in any deep dive where you're looking at set pieces.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right on. I like all three of those. I think all three would pair very well in all three very different ways. You need to know your demographic when you pitch these double features.
Popeye's arm is his own set piece.
It definitely is. The other one I just wanted to throw out, since you brought up Popeye with Robin Williams, was Hook, was my other idea, just because it has that swashbuckling. Obviously, that one's more swashbuckling than this one, but the town feels very kind of like set in the sea pirates ways in a way, especially with like the big set piece of outside the schoolyard. I don't know. I thought that would have been fun, but we'll throw it out to the audience too. If you guys have out there what you would pair Pete's Dragon 1977 with, please let us know. Let us know in the comments of YouTube, or shoot us a comment on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, because I'm going to work our way into our plugs here, because that's where you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and Letterboxd HQ. Brian, I'm going to throw it off to you on where they can subscribe to the podcast.
Apple, Spotify, Google, Stitcher, Amazon, and YouTube. Come check us out on YouTube. Obviously, you get us on video, you get to see our pretty faces. Everywhere else, you get to listen to us ramble on for a couple hours.
Yeah, absolutely. And then last thing, we do have a Patreon, which Brian talked about way at the top of this show, where we're going to be doing an episode on Space Jam: A New Legacy, full spoiler type of review, full spoiler discussion on that. So be on the lookout for that. That is going to be coming up here this upcoming week, which it's going to be the most divided episode that we've done so far on Patreon, I do believe. So be on the lookout for that. And special shout out to our patrons, Logan, Blake, Andy, Derek, Lou, Corey, Darren, John. Thank you guys so much for supporting the show. Hopefully you guys enjoy the episode coming out on Space Jam: A New Legacy. Again, patreon.com/backlot605 to join that there. And then one more thing I do want to throw out, since we did our Facebook plugs, I'm going to throw out to our Facebook group that we have, which is the South Dakota Film Community Group. If you haven't joined already, please do so. Please join the group, join in the conversation there, spark a conversation on there. And then we also have coming up here July 28th at the end of the month, the last Wednesday of July, which is our South Dakota Film Community Meetup, which we have kind of restructured in a way. It's not going to be as much of a film discussion as like we do on our podcast here. It's going to be more of just kind of like how we can grow the film community, including filmmakers, film fans, people who want to present films in the area. So it's going to be more of that moving forward. So kind of a slight change, which I'm very excited that we are doing. So that again is the last Wednesday of July 28th, 8 p.m. Full Circle Book Co-op. Come on down, come join us, come in and join the conversation. Let us share your ideas there. So that's what we got for plugs. I'm going to throw it to our guest, Dylan. Where can they find you online? Where can they find some of your work as well?
Yeah. So you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. This is going to be horrible to say, but on Facebook, I'm the Dylan Jacobson, as well as on Instagram, on Twitter, and Twitch, which is my new fun platform. It's at Dylan J. Jacobson. I promise I'll fix that and get them all to be the same at some point. But that's housekeeping, and housekeeping takes forever. I'm also over on Patreon. You can support me over there. It's just patreon.com/Dylan. I joined when it was in beta, so I got my name. And yeah, we're going to be bringing back Drink and Draw, Dylan's Drink and Draw, which was a monthly event we were doing in Sioux Falls for a while, and then the world ended. We'll be bringing that back at SuperCon for 2 nights of crazy drink and draw with support from the Sioux Falls Game Chest. So we give away board games. You draw funny pictures. We judge them. Everyone has a drink, and things go nuts. So if you want to do in-person stuff, you can join us at SuperCon for that. And if you're a patron of mine, you don't have to pay to get in. So pretty slick.
Nice.
Yeah.
Right on. Yeah, that is going to be awesome. Very excited to catch up with you at SuperCon here, and we're just little over 2 months away from SuperCon.
It feels longer than it is.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm very excited to be back in person. I was like both of you, I'm sure, was missing the in-person event last year. It was something that I'm glad we're going to have it back, and I think it's just going to be bigger and better than it's ever been. So yeah. I'm very excited to have that back. First weekend of October coming up.
Definitely.
Gonna be nuts.
We're gonna have so much fun.
It is going to be a lot of fun, a lot of things going on. Again, Dylan, thank you so much for joining us on the show. This was a blast. We'll have to have you back on in the future to do another episode. Maybe I don't know. We'll have to think of some. Maybe like Brian, we're going to eventually have to do a Wes Anderson series, because I am a horrible Wes Anderson watcher because I have only ever seen Moonrise Kingdom.
Let's do Grand Budapest.
Mm-hmm.
I think that one, and
we're bad. We're bad, Brian.
the Royal Tenenbaums.
Yeah,
it's a good one.
I think those are the only 2 that I've seen, and the only reason why I watched Moonrise is because we did the you want to do camping series.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, we'll have to fit a Wes Anderson series, and Dylan will be the first person that we call for Grand Budapest Hotel for that. So again, Dylan, thank you so much for joining us on the show. For Brian Mensing, I am Casey Kelderman. We'll check y'all out next time on the Backlot of South Dakota.
Bye.